This video is going to review the things that we want to accomplish in version 2 of the Sounder project. There's not a lot to it. It's a relatively light load to lift, but it is a good step in the right direction. What we're looking at right here is what needs to happen in the back end. And the four things that we're going to talk about later are content data, where it's coming from, playlist creation data, receiving a playlist, and admin content upload, where actually the admin is, looking up songs and adding them to the start page. So let's take a look at a wireframe, and then we'll return to this and go over all of it again. This is what I envision the start frame or the start page to look like. This content is being pulled over from the user streaming provider, and the back-end person will have to parse those song IDs so this will show up correctly. And it's where the user begins, okay? And once they select some music, then they'll enter the previewing screen, and this is where song previews play one after the other. We'll pull over the artwork for each song. We'll have banner ads in between each preview. I have some menu items down here, the usual suspects. Now, the UI in the front end person may think that this isn't correct, and they very well may be right. So whatever they decide needs to be down there will probably be something different. At any rate, I had pause, search, saves, and settings. Once the user touches the song, it'll evoke a script and it'll cause the song to play in full. So it'll fill the screen with the song's artwork. There will be a progression bar that shows how far along the song is playing from beginning to the end. Again, another banner ad down here, and a proposed set of buttons for this particular screen. I had go back, archive, which would stop the song and save the title, and then pause. Obviously, if you don't want to hear the song right, then you can stop it. And then share, so you could text a link or send a link to a friend. Past that, we would have a save screen. Now, saved or save, whatever you want to call it, this is where you would find all the songs that you listened to. You heard the preview, you decided you wanted to hear more of it. The title is saved in this area, and it's organized by the date that you saved it. There could be some type of search feature here, because I imagine that this list will get extensive the longer the user interacts with the app, but we'll just have to think about that down the road. And they could actually, well, I don't know if this menu would work here or not. They can play songs from here, I believe, so we'll need to think about what would happen if they touch a song that's in the saved area. Playlist screen. This is a very important part of version 2. This is where you'll see everything that's going on with playlist. So a user could make a playlist inside of here that they would share. They can keep track of playlists that they've received from others, and they could tell the app to play a playlist that's listed inside of here. Of course, this menu is just a suggestion. Past that, we have some more admin type screen areas. This is one of them. This is where the user, at first use, when they're signing up for an account, they drop into this screen and they would tell us who their provider is. And if they didn't choose one, could YouTube be the default, since it's free? It's something for us to think about. They can choose intervals between each preview or each sample, between 5 seconds and 30 seconds. 15 seconds, I think, should be the default. And then there's a settings area if they ever need to return here, where they could, change their provider and change the interval that the songs play. And then you have the usual suspects, rate the app, stuff of that nature, contact us. So that would also be a screen. Let's take a look at the flow of this thing. Like, what exactly would it look like or could look like? So when the user downloads the app for the first time, they're going to need some directions. And some folks aren't going to necessarily want to jump in and give us their information. So they could say, hey, I'll sign up later. I just want to see what this does. No matter what, they're going to need some kind of instruction to use this thing. These are 3 suggestions that I put out there. A UI person might think better of how this is laid out, but I think it needs to be addressed. If the user selected to sign up, the usual screen pops up, give us some information, and then they would move down to the screen where they tell us who their provider is and the intervals that they want to hear the previews. And then bam, it drops them into the start page where there's some suggested content that they can interact with, or they can search for content. That would all happen inside of here. If they didn't want to sign up, then they would be dropped in this content area, and they could interact with these songs and listen to the previews. So after they decided what kind of music they wanted to hear, then we'd enter the previewing area, and the songs would start playing samples of each song. And that's how that would work. Now let's take a look at what happens to these folks that selected later. Well, if they decide that they want to save a song, we're going to have to drop them back into this registration screen where we reason with them and say, hey, if you want to save these things, we need to know who you are. And so that screen would pop up, and they'd have to either sign up for an account or just exit the app. Once they did this, it would drop them back into their preview screen, and they would start listening to songs again, or listening to the full song that they wanted to hear before it asked them for their information. I hope that makes sense. A signed in or registered user would just drop in the content, and they'd select some content, and off they go. Boom, they'd start listening to songs, and when they wanted to hear something, they'd just touch the song and it would play the full thing. Now, like every app, there's considerations that we need to think about. And one is, let's say they leave the app for some amount of time, take a phone call, do whatever else, close the app. Should the app remember where they were in their playlist or in any of this content so they don't have to re-listen to all those previews again? This is a question for the developers. We need to think about what might be best practice here based on how maybe Apple Music might handle something like this, or Spotify. We are the Mavericks here because this app has never been done before, at least not the way that we have it configured. So we need to think about what should happen when people are reopening the app and interacting with a playlist that they've already been listening to. The next one that we need to consider is this default provider question. Can it be YouTube without trying to take some, or without getting a huge hit for all the data from the videos playing somewhere? I don't know if we can just scrape the song. Maybe we can. I'll let you guys noodle on that one a bit. And then the menu bar. What should be represented down there? Again, that's going to take a developer that's got some experience with other apps and knowing how to make this thing so people don't get stuck. Past that, there's a couple of cool things that we should look into to get answers for. Is how hard would it be to configure this thing for CarPlay? Because that's the obvious place where this is going to get used. That's where I would use it all the time anyway. And then leveraging this thing so you can use voice commands through Siri, because even better than touching that song would be play that song, and it would play the active preview, and you wouldn't have to do shit except listen to the song. Oh yeah, one other thing that you probably want to know is what happens after the song finishes playing, which would be right here. So after the song finishes, playing, it intuitively returns to this playlist previewing screen. So whatever they were previewing here, once the song plays, it bounces back to there. So that's something that I didn't put in this wireframe, but that's how it would work. Okay, so that's that. Let's go back over and look at those database needs. So now that we understand what things look like, yeah, content data. So our database person's going to have to work with the content that we're pulling from Apple Music or Spotify or YouTube and scrape the information that's there so that we can pass those song IDs to the app and it can search on them and provide the previews. So that's what content data is all about. Playlist creation. This is huge. Remember that playlist area that we talked about? Well, we want the user to be able to look up songs and make playlists specifically for the purpose of sharing with other users. The back-end dev's going to have to figure out a way to compile the song IDs and make a link so the user can send it either by text or inside the app. I don't know which one's better. You guys will have to tell me. But that's what the playlist creation data is all about. And then receiving a playlist. Something that happens a lot is users inside of their ecosystem, whether it be Apple Music or Spotify, have massive amounts of playlists that they share with each other. I want to be able to take these shared links that are typically text and scrape the song IDs that are in those links and then have it play in Sounder. So you would get that playlist, you could drop it somewhere in Sounder, and it would start playing previews of all those songs. That's huge. That's probably the hardest part of this whole thing, if you ask me. And then last but not least is the ability for the admin to create some content. So let's say that I get a famous music artist that wants to promote a playlist. I'd have the ability to go in, put in the titles of their song. It would generate song IDs and start playing previews if someone selected to hear it. So that's it. Like I said, there's not a lot to this, either from the UI side or from the back end side. The other thing that we'll need from the back end is, the usual suspects, somewhere that stores the name, the login, and all the juicy details that go along with that. But if, of course, I'm sure I'm missing something, so let me know. But that's version 2 of the Sounder project, and I appreciate your attention and look forward to possibly working together on this.